In this video, we're going to look at the results of our critical thinking assessment from last fall. At the opening meeting, you were given some information, but in this video, we want to go more into detail on the results that we got from our assessment. Just to review real quick, remember the students and the faculty took surveys asking them about the process of critical thinking that they went through in their classes last fall. Just a reminder, when students were asked what was the most meaningful or valuable thing you learned from this assignment, overall for the question, about 93% gave positive responses, that they learned something that was meaningful or valuable, and only a small percentage gave negative responses, that they didn't learn anything meaningful or valuable from it. So overall, the students, again, a strong positive response, which is good to hear. Just a comment from a student: this assignment made me think more about what I was discussing in class and more deeply about it, which is really one of the major goals that we have for critical thinking. So students said they learned important skills like analysis, synthesis, and making judgments. The students repeatedly stated that they learned the value of considering multiple or other perspectives, which is a key component of critical thinking. And the students stated they learned more about themselves and how they thought from the assignment that they had done. In terms of faculty, faculty recognized that the work helped students form their own judgments and help them view things differently or from multiple perspectives. And both faculty and students recognized that assignment directions needed to be more clear, or that classroom activities needed to be more developed to help them with the critical thinking assignment. And this is a concept that we'll spend some time with in this video. So how did the students perform? What happened was we took a group of 12 people, and I'll show you their names at the end. This was mentioned in the video at the opening meeting. And critical thinking assignments were randomly chosen from each UCC course section that was taught in the fall of 2013. So over 200 artifacts were assessed. There were 12 faculty reviewers from all different areas, humanistic, science, and social science, and we even had a few that were not from those areas on campus to help us go through the process. We did norming activities, and what this involves is reading some papers, assessing it on the rubric, and then having discussions in groups and making sure that everyone is agreeing on what it means for a paper to be acceptable or excellent on the dimensions of the rubric. So we spent a good amount of time reading and talking and making sure we each understood what each dimension was measuring and what the different levels meant on the rubric. Now, we set success standards because this was an assessment process that we're going to report. And our success standard, our first one, was that 60% of the students will receive acceptable or higher for each dimension of the critical thinking rubric. A second success standard was that 60% of all students will score acceptable or higher on all the dimensions of the rubric. So again, we're treating this as an assessment project because that's what it is. So it's been written up just like you all write up your assessment projects for your programs. Now, this is the critical thinking rubric, and just to review, I don't expect you to be able to read these, but here's acceptable. So we were looking at 60% of the students got acceptable or higher for each dimension of the rubric, and then we use the rubric to look at the randomly chosen assignments. Just to note, we did not look at how the instructor assessed the assignment. We were doing this completely independent of what the faculty numbers were. So here are our results for each of the dimensions, and I'll show you this in a different way in a second. You'll notice for each dimension we did not reach the 60%, and for the overall, only 12% of the students achieved an acceptable or higher on each dimension of the rubric. So for each of these, the standard of 60% was not met. Now, why this is important, we're going to look at this in a different way. This was the results from the 2,234 assignments that were handed in, and looking at their rubrics, these are the percentages that faculty gave each of the assignments the scores they gave them based on the rubric. So if you look over here, here's what all faculty, this is the percent that got above acceptable or got acceptable or higher for all the assignments, for all the 2,234 that all the faculty graded or assessed. And you'll see that for each of these we would have met our success standard. But when you look at the 12 reviewers looking at a random sample from that group, you'll see that the percentages are much, much lower. There's a bunch of reasons why this happened. Because of this, we need to look at a few things to try to improve our scores. And let me talk about why we think all faculty scores were so much higher than the reviewers. Don't think you're bad. It's not a terrible thing. There's a lot of reasons why this happened, and we're going to work to truly improve our critical thinking skills of our students. One reason is time. We were in a hurry to get this done, so it was impossible to get enough professional development out there for people to understand the rubric, to really get into the assignments, and so we were rushed. And so because of that, we need to make some more drastic improvements as we move forward. One problem also was grading versus assessment. Many people, including myself, when I started this, I thought, well, in order to give the student an A, they have to get excellent in all these categories. And so it made it difficult, and a lot of people thought that, well, the student did a really good job. And they may have been reading this saying, yeah, but maybe they only did acceptable in this dimension, but they did a really good job, so I need to give them excellent. So we need to separate the concept of grading an assignment and assessing an assignment. It really isn't realistic to expect most first-year students or second-year students to get in the advanced or excellent. This assessment and this rubric was designed for, by the end of a fourth-year capstone course, students should be in the excellent category. So expectations, we weren't sure of expectations. A lot of faculty weren't aware of that, and there's going to be some professional development on the difference between grading and assessment. A quick example is, and I learned the hard way, I was doing the same thing, but what I've done is I've developed a separate rubric for my assignments, and what that does is, in that rubric, I use these qualities of critical thinking, I use these dimensions, but at the high level for the rubric, I'm at my rubric, I'm up in the acceptable range, because that's really where I want to get my students, because this is a new experience for them. So again, there'll be professional development sessions on the difference between the two and how to develop your own rubric, so you can just assess with this rubric but grade with a different one. And I think just by doing that, our scores, I know this sounds bad, but our scores will go down on the rubric to a more realistic view of what our students can do in terms of critical thinking. Norming is another issue. What does acceptable mean? And we have not, again, we didn't have time to go through that process of norming. Around campus, what acceptable should mean, and when we read a paper, most of us should agree on what level that paper is at in terms of explanation of the problem. So there's going to be some professional development that's also going to deal with norming. You're going to work with other people to determine and to get comfortable with what is developing, what is acceptable in each of the dimensions of the rubric. There was also assignment issues, and this is an issue we need to look at seriously over the next year or so. In several cases, when we looked at the assignment was not written in a way that a student could score acceptable on the different dimensions. It was just written in a way that the right questions weren't asked, that the students couldn't score on a lot of the dimensions. In many of the weaker assignments, the papers were more descriptive, describing something, or comparative. There was not an ill-defined problem or a question that had to be tackled by the student. And so when the assignment wasn't written in a way, the way a critical thinking assignment should, the scores on the rubric were very, very low. Also, we got some artifacts that were not complete. We may have gotten the PowerPoints, but we got no written or oral work, and that way we couldn't, the PowerPoints weren't enough to allow us to look at how well the students use critical thinking. And then some assignments were not actually approved by the UCC Committee, and so we need to work on that also. So how are we going to make these improvements? I'm not going to promise you that they're not going to be a little bit painful, but it's something we need to do. Again, our students found this process in a positive light. They saw it in a positive light, but we've got to do more to help them be more successful. One is rubric norming. We need to all be around campus consistent in our use of the rubric. So what's going to happen is all UCC faculty will need to attend one norming professional development session either in January or May of 2015. When you signed up and agreed that your class would be UCC, one of the things you agreed to was attending professional development, and this is one that we expect that UCC faculty will attend. And again, what we hope to see happen is when you start norming the rubric, when you start really understanding the rubric, it will naturally make you go back and look at your assignments, and that will help improve the quality of the assignments. We've also come up with guidelines for the development of an assignment, and I don't want to go through each of these one by one, but you'll get a printout of these, but it needs to be a substantive written or recorded oral project, an essay, presentation. They have to do some research on an ill-defined problem. They have to give evidence. They have to look at the influence of context and assumptions. They have to examine 2 or more perspectives. If you follow these guidelines and then get some assistance from people that have done this before, hopefully it will improve your assignment, make it more of a critical thinking assignment. I do want to point out, though, on the bottom here, it has to constitute at least 10% of a student's overall course grade. It has to have meaning in your course. This is also what a critical assignment is not, and it's on the same handout. It's not a summary or paraphrase. It's not a review of a topic, a person, or an issue. It's not informative. It's going to have an informative component, but that's not the focus of a critical thinking assignment. It has to allow the students to expand on their thinking, so it can't just be something where you have questions that are expected to be answered in 1 or 2 sentences. You can't do critical thinking that way. So this is what it's not. This is what it is. That should help you get some guidelines. Also, faculty may be asking when do you have to resubmit, and when you don't have to resubmit your assignments to the UCC committee. So this gives you guidelines. This gives you guidelines of when you have to resubmit if you're changing your assignment, if it's a major development, if it's a new UCC course. Again, if there's a major change in it, if there's a change in how much it's worth, those kind of things. Here's when you don't have to resubmit it, and you can just make small changes and work with what you have without going back to the UCC committee to get it approved. And again, you'll be given all this in a handout. This is who is on the UCC committee, so if you want to talk to them, they can give you some information on the process of submitting a new UCC or critical thinking assignment, or modifying the one that you currently have. Another way we're going to help faculty is we're going to develop a CT, a critical thinking assignment library. There'll be a link available to you soon, and we took the best assignments from science area, humanities, and social science, and they are excellent examples of assignments that will allow your students to do critical thinking and will allow them to score higher on the rubric. So again, that'll be available to you soon, and we'll send out an email regarding that. Also, this is the group of people that were involved in the critical thinking assessment that was done in May. So these people have been through the norming. We've read hundreds of assignments. So if you need help developing or changing your assignment, please feel free to contact any of these people, and they'll be more than happy to sit down with you and work through the improvements that you might need in your assignment. Okay, so that's just an overview. If you have any questions, again, you can talk to the groups I just showed you, UCC committee, or the people that were on the assessment group this May. And so again, our goal here is the students are getting something out of this. What we want to do is we want to continue that process, and we want to give them a better chance to even improve their critical thinking scores and their critical thinking skills even more. All right, everyone have a good day.